Okay, Tim McInerney, are you present?
Yes.
Dan McInerney?
Present.
Paul Stanbridge?
Present.
Hudson Van Sickle?
Present.
And Andy, are you present?
I am present.
So we're all here. Hail, hail. Okay, welcome to the meeting of the Planning Board, February 16, 2021. First on the agenda is Washington Muse. Now, I'm going to read some of the feedback I got on the stormwater and the maintenance procedures. This is from Charles Zawicki. The stormwater inspection and maintenance agreement is fine, as well as the sanitary sewer access easement. However, the developer has 2 manholes that require vacuum tests. All other work is complete. As discussed, hold off on final approval until tests are completed. That's on that. Now we'll go to the bond. Okay, the bond was executed on October the 20th, 2020. And we didn't receive it until today. Why? I couldn't answer that. But maybe the attorney, Amy Mealy, can answer these questions.
Well,
so I'll let her speak
Jim,
now.
before we go to Amy, and yes, I thank Amy for being here on behalf of the applicant. Just to update the board, this received final site plan approval in October of 2018. The applicant came back last January, and the board approved by resolution dated January 15th, 2020, a reinstatement of the previously approved site plan. The Village Code, section 266-62.1, indicates an applicant has 6 months from the date of the final approval to get the map signed to meet the conditions, and they're entitled to 2 90-day extensions. That frankly would come up to about the middle of January. I've had discussion with Amy Mealy, who's now the new attorney for the applicant, and I believe they'll be requesting the extension tonight. I did get a letter from her today. We've been speaking about this. Given some of the governor's executive orders extending or tolling statutes of limitation, as well as the Village of Suffern having declared a state of emergency, I believe twice. We're not technically in a state of emergency by the village itself. That's the village laws right now, but you know, there were 2 states of emergency declared last year by the village in relation to the pandemic, of course. So that's where we're at. We're at the position of, or the point of them asking for an extension and or tolling of the time based upon the events of last year. Amy, I'll turn it over to you now.
I want a 60-day extension, Rob. 60 days, is that right? Is that what I read?
Let's let the attorney speak first.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Amy Mealy. I represent the applicant on the Washington Muse project. I literally was just retained at the end of last week. So forgive me if I'm not as familiar with the file as I will be. But when I talked to Mr. Magrino, we thought it prudent. I'm asking for a modest 60-day extension. And during that 60 days, we will make sure to finalize all of the documentation. Like prior attorney got Mr. Magrino most of the documents, and the chairman just stated that it looks like the stormwater agreement is okay. That'll give us a chance to do the vacuum tests on the 2 manholes. It'll also give a chance for me to get you guys a title report, which I believe that Mr. Magrino wanted. So I'm respectfully requesting a brief 60-day extension of the site plan approval. this evening, so I can get up to speed and get you all what you want and get this project hopefully wrapped up.
What was that report that you mentioned just now, Amy?
A title report. I believe that Mr. Magrino wanted us to obtain a title on, I guess there's certain lands, that are being conveyed either by easement, not in fee, I don't think.
No, right. When the applicant is giving an easement to the village, so we get a what I call a small title insurance policy, usually an amount of $35,000, just insuring to the village that they have the right to grant that easement, basically. So we need that because there's a pipe, obviously, now in that easement.
Is that anything to do with Pleasant Avenue?
If you mean the pipe, it's the easement. It's about the easement.
Okay, and so that's one of the reasons that they're asking for the extension. Are there any other reasons?
Well, I would say, just to reiterate what Mr. Magrino said, if this basically was reinstated in January 2020, there was basically pretty much a shutdown, at least in my experience. I don't know about Suffern, but in my experience, there was pretty much a 3 to 4 month shutdown of all land use meetings in Rockland County from about March on. And again, I've just been retained, so I need to familiarize myself with the file. You had mentioned that we need the 2 vacuum tests, 60 days should be sufficient to perform them. And in terms of getting you a title policy, the title companies are a little busy these days, but 60 days should be plenty of time to get you a $35,000 title policy.
Right, and what they're talking about with those tests, if you recall, the village was under a consent order from the DEC to move the pipe. This project came in, and rather than do the work twice, having the village do it, and then the applicant would have had to move it in any event for this project, the board authorized, and they went ahead, and DEC, and they went ahead and moved the pipe prior to getting the map signed and prior to, basically as part of the resolution for the approval. What Mr. Sawicki is talking about in terms of hold off on the approval, he's saying don't accept the easement until those last 2 tests are conducted. And we can do that. As the chairman knows, and I guess most of the board knows, really what I would say were a couple of housekeeping matters, a fire lane agreement, this easement, stormwater maintenance agreement, and there was just a delay in getting it back. We had what I'll call a productive conversation or meeting with the applicant and their attorney. So they've now given me the executed documents, a couple of loose ends to tie up with those, including the title policy that I mentioned. So it might be prudent to put this, maybe grant an extension to when the April meeting is. And frankly, that's just to get the map signed. Once the map is signed, they have 3 years to obtain a building permit. So, it behooves the applicant to just take care of these couple of items, which Ms. Mealy has indicated, they will do now.
And this couldn't be done in 30 days?
I think 60 would make sense for everybody. It just wouldn't, the title policy wouldn't come in. I don't think it would make sense.
All right, we'll take a vote on the board and see what they say. Anybody on the board want to make a motion to extend for 60 days?
I'll make a motion. This is Paul. I make a motion to extend for 60 days.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Damn it.
I'm going to suggest the motion be to extend the approval through, when is the meeting in April supposed to be?
Let me look.
The 21st?
Yes.
Okay. I'll amend my motion to extend the approval until April 21st.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you all very much. Have a nice evening. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is Antrim Point. Let's hear from the applicant, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members. Ira Emanuel Law PC, New City, New York. Good to see everybody again. It's been a little while. First of all, I want to thank you for putting this matter on the agenda on such short notice. What we're here for this evening is for the board to review and give us approval with respect to the stone wall along Lafayette Avenue at this project. You all know the project. It has been before the board a number of times. It is under new ownership, which is now undertaking construction. And the site plan approval that was originally granted back in 2017 states at condition number 18, when removing and reinstalling the stone wall along Lafayette Avenue, the applicant shall, to the extent practicable, use stone from the original wall when reinstalling the stone wall as shown on the site plan. Well, we have apparently run into some difficulty with respect to that. I have with me this evening George Brandt, who is with the developer, and also Dan Schnall, who is the engineer for the developer. I'll turn it over to Mr. Brandt to describe what the issue is, and then Mr. Schnall will give an engineering opinion with respect to it.
Okay.
Thank you, Ira. Good evening, board members, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Magrino. So by way of background, when we initiated site work by widening the driveway, you'll recall that it was a very narrow driveway. You could barely fit a car into that space. Our site contractor started to remove sections of the wall so we could get equipment, bulldozers, excavators, etc., onto the property. And when he started removing sections of the wall, then we examined more closely what was there. We discovered that there was no footing, there was no drainage. The wall was in very poor condition. And in consultation with our engineer, our civil engineer, our structural engineer, we concluded that without question that wall had to be an engineered wall. And so that's what brings us to tonight. After the initial sections were removed, the old wall began to list 10, 12 inches toward Route 59. And so we completed the demolition of that wall. And again, we concluded that rebuilding that wall the way it was constructed, the shape of the stone, it just wasn't feasible for us to reconstruct that. And we, as I said, we concluded that we'd have to install an engineered wall in its place. Excuse
me for interrupting. That took place months ago. You took that stone wall down months ago.
In October.
That stone was on site for months in plain view from Lafayette Avenue. Why did you wait to tell us that there was a problem until a couple of weeks ago?
Well, we just recently, and if you can refer to the replacement wall engineering, you'll see that it has a recent dating. So we did our best to move as quickly as we could, as most builders want to do. But we just, within the last couple of weeks or so, 2 or 3 weeks, received the engineering design of what would replace it. And so from our standpoint, we felt like we should talk to the board when we can say what we have to replace that wall, rather than say we have a problem and we don't have a solution.
Okay, I'm going to ask my question again. When the stone was destroyed, why didn't you notify the village building department that there was a problem? You were going to have to engineer this wall with something behind it anyway. It wasn't going to stand alone.
You speak of the stone wall.
Correct.
My understanding, Mr. Chairman, is that there's no way to engineer a wall out of the remnants of that old wall.
I'm sorry.
Well, you're going to engineer it with block or however, poured concrete, whatever you're going to do. You could have attached those stones, face it onto that wall. Those stones were visible to me every time I drove down Lafayette Avenue for months. They were practically in the middle of the driveway, way up at the top of the site. All of a sudden, they're gone. This is my question. And perfectly, I mean, we put that in there because if you go up and down Lafayette Avenue, that's the wall you see. That's the board felt that it had to be maintained. And unfortunately, I don't know why it became destroyed, but it was on site for months. And then all of a sudden, we get a call that the stone is not usable. So something isn't adding up to me. I don't know about anybody else on this board, but I'm speaking for myself.
What's happened to the stone? Where is the stone right now? Is it not on site any longer?
Stone is not on site.
Where is it?
It was crushed and recycled.
Doesn't that seem like a foolish decision in hindsight, that you've taken something that was a part of your planning approval and destroyed it, literally crushed it?
Whether it was a good decision or a bad decision, that's unfortunately the current situation.
And what are you proposing?
It
look like a space CMU or something?
Mr. Stanbridge, let me just say, I know that the chairman, in expressing that he would pass the site regularly, and all of you would pass the site regularly. There's no mistake. You saw large stockpiles of dirt piled up on the property. It's very, very tight. They needed the room, to be frank. We just
why didn't you move it off site? You knew you had to reuse that stone.
The direction from the plans and from the resolution was to reuse the material to the extent, the greatest extent possible. The greatest extent practicable. So we made a judgment that it was not practical to reuse that stone. And that's the God's honest truth, and that's what I can tell you, Mr.
So I would think the next step would be, I mean, that's not an exotic stone from Asia or anything. It's a local stone. So I would think the next step is to build a concrete retaining wall with a stone face on it that matches or is similar to the existing stone that runs up and down the entire street. Why are you proposing a split face concrete block, which couldn't be an uglier facing for a wall in the village?
You're absolutely right, Paul.
Okay. Mr. Stanbridge, you'll recall that there was a terraced wall behind that lower wall. And that's a split block wall. So we thought we'd match all three walls, the lower wall and the two sections of terraced wall that wrap around the building. So that's the thinking there. Our intention was, if we could have in the beginning, you reuse that wall, we would have. In fact, if you look at the site plan, you'll see that our project ID sign tries to emulate that stone finish. So we wanted to use that wall. It just, as I said, it created too many problems for us. We do have our engineer with us tonight, and maybe he can speak a little bit about the necessity of installing an engineered wall there.
And your sign is using a new stone that looks like the old stone.
It's a veneer.
Right. I would go invest in some more of that then and start applying it to your retaining wall, so it looks like the rest of the wall. That's my view. That's just me. It's not the board saying that, but it seems.
Well, listen, we know you're going to have to put an engineered wall. We want you to face it with the same field stone that was destroyed. That's my opinion, and we'll hear from the rest of the board after we hear from your engineer.
Dan?
I asked you to unmute, Dan. I don't know if you can.
There we go.
Yes.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Daniel Chanel with Dynamic Engineering, civil engineer of record for this application. Not sure if you've had an opportunity to review the letter that we submitted in conjunction with this wall, but we did prepare a letter that was addressed to the village, essentially just outlining our opinion of the existing stone wall in relation to a proposed engineered wall. So as you're aware, that wall has been there for some time. Looking back at the history of that wall, we believe it was installed by the DOT when they were making improvements to 59, probably sometime back in the 40s. That wall was basically just thrown together with any native stone that was in the area, a lot of mortar. It really, obviously not a engineered wall design. As Mr. Brandt testified, when they started deconstructing that wall, it was discovered that there was no foundations associated with the wall. There's no drainage behind the wall. And as they began to take that wall down, it became apparent that it started listing. So it started falling over on itself. So that is pretty good evidence that it really was a safe wall to reuse in the condition that it was. I understand that the board did request that they utilize the existing stone to reconstruct a new wall. However, it becomes a challenge to engineer a wall based upon the use of natural stone because you don't know the natural faults that are associated with those stone. You don't know the strength that's with that stone. There could be very varying strengths and abilities to reuse that stone, and it really creates an unsafe condition. So always want to provide a engineered wall design, especially for any wall that's over 4 feet in height. This one ranges in sight from 4 feet to about just under 6 feet. So you absolutely need an engineered design that provides sufficient design for drainage to allow any groundwater that is accumulating behind the wall to be able to drain out from behind that wall using different types of perforated pipes and stone materials in order to allow that water to drain, so you're not providing excess pressure on that wall. And in order to do that, you need to use a consistent material. So what Mr. Brandt and the applicants are proposing to do now is obviously a split-faced wall design that is fully engineered by a separate geotechnical structural engineer who's designing that wall to account for all of these additional forces from the water behind the wall, obviously retaining the soil, and a full foundation design that's going to be a sufficient design that's going to meet engineering standards today, be to code, and be a safer application than utilizing the existing stone. So that was the intent of our letter, just to provide some background why our opinion, it's not really practical to construct a fully structural wall just using that stone alone, which is why we would feel that a engineered wall that matches the other proposed walls that are further behind that originally designed wall to provide some uniformity and consistency across the site as well.
I don't think anybody on this board has a problem with you using an engineered wall. We want that wall faced with the stone or as close to that stone as possibly is available. I'm sure that stone is available somewhere. We want the wall to be engineered. We want the drainage to be there, but you can face it with that type of stone. That's all we're asking. If you're done, I'm going to let some of the other members speak.
Yes, sir.
We do have the engineer for the Sharif El Far for the design of the a block wall. If you want to hear from him, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I've seen what you're proposing to face it with. This is the whole crux of the matter. We want the engineered wall, as I said. We don't want it faced the way your picture is showing it. So if you want him to speak, go right ahead and let him speak.
Sharif?
Hello, I'm here.
If you could just briefly touch on the design of the wall, Sharif, and whether or not we can, as it seems the direction of the board, whether or not we can design a structural wall that we can finish with some type of stone veneer to match what was previously, as best we can, what was previously located on the property.
Okay, so the existing design shows a pre-engineered modular earth reinforced type wall, which the face of the wall, it's a flexible type, and the face of the wall really cannot be clad with anything. I believe one of the board members correctly said, if we want to have the face to look like the previous wall was a rock face, then we would have to build a rigid wall. We cannot really use this type of flexible wall and face it, but we have to use a rigid wall, which is a reinforced concrete type retaining wall, and then you can face that with the stone.
It's possible to do that. It's possible to put a different wall, poured concrete, and then face it with the stone that we're asking for.
Yes, sir. This is possible, but we will have to change the design that's currently done. You cannot use a modular wall anymore. We have to use a rigid wall, which is just a poured in place, reinforced concrete wall, and that will be faced with the stone.
Okay, that's our option that we're probably looking for.
But before we do that, because there's a real substantial cost difference, I would invite the board to look at the various type of modular blocks that's available in the market, which is, there's a huge slew of them, and they're definitely not a natural stone looking, but they do have a lot of variety that is substantially cost effective, and they look very good. If that's possible, it would be a much cost efficient design than building a concrete wall and facing with the stone. But again, I'm just speaking from the engineering and cost point of view.
But that would be fine in my view, except that it's not like this building is in isolation. It's not in the middle of the countryside. It's another building along the main street into the village. And there's a continuous wall that runs all the way from almost Indian Rock down. It's intermittent, but it's a continuous wall. I think you need to match it. I think that was the reason behind the condition, is that we wanted some continuity. So in terms of cost, if you can find a way to do it with the geotextiles or something, I don't really care how you do it, as long as it's stable. I did notice that the wall started to list quite a bit when you parked heavy construction equipment directly adjacent to it, creating maybe a lateral thrust. I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but I think the intent is for there to be some consistency as you move into the village, not that there's a different stone wall. Have you already bought the blocks? I think you sent us a picture of the blocks on site.
Yeah, we're installing them as we speak.
I would stop that. I wouldn't do that anymore.
Well,
why would you do that without coming to the board? Why would you start to install anything before you got permission from the board?
we don't.
I'm not hearing an answer.
I don't have an answer for you, Mr. Chairman. We bought them. We intended to install them. The direction we thought we were following on from the resolution and as referred to on the plans was to the greatest extent practical, but only for a long enough.
But there was no effort at all. Sorry,
Andrew, give me a second. When you notified the building inspector of what happened to this stone, he made it known to you that the board was probably not going to take this lightly.
Well, that's when we heard that for the first time, Mr. Chairman. Let me say this: what I would propose is that maybe because it is quite costly to construct a poured concrete wall and place stone veneer. So maybe we can, through a combination of grading and trying to identify a veneer that tries to emulate what was there, maybe we can manage our costs. But it's a great cost burden to do what you're proposing that we do. Which is why you shouldn't have started to do it without seeking the approval of the board.
It's a fairly narrow frontage. We're not talking about like 100 foot, 200, 300, 400, 500 foot.
It's 270 feet of wall.
Okay, that's a lot, but
that's a lot.
That's unreasonable.
I'm sorry?
That's a lot, but I think in order to maintain the consistency, which was a condition of the approval, I don't think that's unreasonable.
I understand. We viewed it as not practical to reconstruct the wall with those stone blocks. We would have been we'd be in the same place that we are now. And probably if Dan Schnoll and Sharif were engineering this from the beginning, they would have come up with a different engineering solution that could have achieved what the board's intention was, which was to maintain that street scape, that curb appeal as you go back and forth on 59. Maybe we would have come up with a different solution. But as I said earlier, we're where we are today. And so we're looking for a way to manage our cost and get it done quickly because it's an erosion control problem for us also. So Dan, I want to hear from you. Do you think we can lower the height of the wall by working the grades a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's achievable. We can certainly take a look and tighten those grade lines up a little bit. We can definitely lower that height of the wall. I don't know if we can eliminate the need for a wall, but we can certainly lower it.
And your planning approval, you've already got your plans approved. If you're going to change your plans, don't we have to do it?
You have to come back in and show us what you want to do.
Of course. Of course. Now, we looked, actually, Ira and I were speaking tonight, and Dan was speaking about across the street. And that looked like maybe it was possibly not a stone wall, but an engineered wall. But that property sits below 59. So it's got basically a knee wall, for lack of a better description. So if we can lower the wall and give the board what they want, which is to maintain that aesthetic, we'll try to do it.
Okay, why don't you work on that?
All right, and then we will
return
and we'll show you the plan, and hopefully you can send us on our way.
We need to
listen, I don't hold you guys up at all. You guys have been working through the worst weather. We appreciate the work you've been doing. It's just that this was very important. That's why it was included in the approval.
Did you have something to say, Andrew? Yeah. I thought Andrew wanted to say something.
Sorry.
No, I just there was a point being driven where they said that to the best extent practical. They said, and we just didn't find it practical. But I just found that by getting rid of the stone and everything else, it was putting everything into the position of, well, we're gonna wind up going this route regardless, because now the stone is gone, now the stone is crushed, and well, you know, we just don't really have that option available. Period. The end. You know, I think, you know, like I said, I think that the aesthetics there is important. The wall's not going to look exactly the same as the rest of the wall. Obviously, mortar over time and everything else. We understand that, but it just seemed like, you know, the solution was, well, you know what, it's not an option anymore, and that's the end of it.
The point I was trying, excuse me, Andrew, the point I was trying to make was that some of those stones are very heavy, and they had to be hand cleaned one by one. And even with that, you could maybe do some type of landscape wall, a much lower profile wall. But it couldn't be an engineered wall. That's what's required for the design of the project. My point was that even if we wanted to hold on to that stone, and we couldn't, we had no room. We have no room. As I said, it's a tight site. Even if we held on to it, we couldn't reuse it.
There's no way that could be used as a facing facade. Not at all.
No. How?
Because.
Why not?
Okay, good. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't understand why not. You build a non-retaining wall in front of an actual retaining wall. Why are you saying that wouldn't be possible? Your whole argument was that it wouldn't be stable enough. But if there's a concrete wall or something else doing all the work, why couldn't you build the other wall in front of it?
How high would we stack the wall? I don't know. I'm not an engineer either, Paul. I defer to the engineers. If they tell me, George, you have to use an engineered wall there, I listen to them.
My point is, once the stone was carted away and crushed, there was no other. There was no other option. So I mean, it would sort of be like, you know, we knocked down the building. Sorry, we should have gotten a permit, but you know what? The building's knocked down. There's really nothing we can do about it right now.
Not at all, Andrew. And I will say this: when we maybe you may think we've been late to the party here, but we've always tried to be proactive. If we encounter an issue, we're always talking to Mr. Sawicki, for example, to get his input. We're not trying to go around the village. We're trying to do the best we can under the circumstances that we find ourselves.
Hey, can I ask a question of Robert Magrino?
Sure.
Robert, I understand. I mean, I don't want these guys to go bankrupt building a wall, but if they come back with new plan, I remember the application for the site, and there was lots of drainage and traffic studies and things like this. Lots of hurdles that had to be accomplished. The drainage is what I'm thinking about. If they come back with a new graded plan, do they have to go through different agencies to get that approved? Are we really allowed to just approve a new grading and drainage strategy?
Yeah, especially if you're doing, I would imagine grading, that would be an issue. But, you know, I don't know if it makes sense to do that. You know, I mean, I'm hearing what's saying, and you know, I do remember when this came in, the rock wall, I think, was an issue. I think the feeling was that, I don't know if it was unstable at the time or whatever, but I mean, to me, it seems if there's a way you can do some type of rock with what you have, you know, there's no way that you can do that. A rock, you know, replace basically what you're doing with the rock base.
I don't know how we'd be able to split those stones.
The stones are
no, not the existing ones. I mean,
a new match.
You know, just something that looks similar. Honestly, I thought maybe there would be a way. You know, I mean, when people do their houses, you get samples of different designs.
We're going to try to do that.
That one looks more like brick. Is there one that looks more like rock, even if it's not identical?
We're going to try to locate that. And we'll speak with Mr. Stahl and discuss with him the impact on permitting. We don't want to go back and have to re-permit the job.
Yeah.
because
yeah.
of.
I mean, if you start moving,
we'd rather propose
and everything else.
We'd rather propose no wall and landscape the entire front if we had to go back and permit it, and give some nice trees and planting beds and flowers, and make it really beautiful with softscape rather than the hardscape, which is probably actually more money and more maintenance for us, but we think maybe a better product in the end. But, you know, I'm not going to substitute my judgment for the aesthetic judgment of the board and the village.
Okay, you say you're going to try to find the stone that can be placed onto the architectural wall. That's a start. And get back to us if you can engineer the wall and have a stone face put onto it as close as possible to what's there. And we have a little history with repairing that wall because over the years cars have run into it and it's been repaired. So you can work with it. It's not ideal to work with. We understand that, but it has been done. Would anybody else on the board like to speak?
Do we need to vote on this, or is it just a direction that we'll vote on as a change to the planning approval later on?
Yeah, there's nothing really to vote on.
I think we've put, you know, put what we want in front of them, and now let's see what they can come back with. There's no vote necessary. When they come back with an alternative, or if they can do exactly what we want, then we'll take a vote.
Okay, good.
We understand what the board is looking for.
Okay. Well, like I said, thanks for coming in, and I've complimented this job to everybody because of their diligence in doing the work. And it's just a shame that this happened.
We'll get past it. We'll get past it, Mr. Chairman. We'll get past it.
Okay, I know we will. I have no doubt we will.
Thank you.
Okay,
thank you very
much. Dan, thanks. Sharif, thanks. Ira, thank you very much.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
All right.
You want to put the next meeting?
The next meeting is
17.
Let me look at the calendar. 17th is right.
Jim?
Yes, Joanne.
I have a problem with the 17th.
You have a problem with the 17th?
It's St. Patrick's Day, and I'm not available.
Okay. How about the 16th?
That's fine.
Yeah, we can't do the 18th because maybe you won't recover by then.
Yeah, what do you got planned, Joanne?
I just cook, just my small little family, but it's, you know.
I'm only teasing you. All right, let's do this. Anybody else have a problem with the 16th?
At 5:30?
Yeah.
If it works for everybody, sure.
Fine.
Fine with me.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay with me?
Fine with me.
If they don't come back with anything, Jim, we may not even have a meeting.
Right. It's, you know, it's, if they have a plan to bring before us, then we'll meet. If not, we'll meet the following month. Okay. Can I have a motion to close the meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Dan McInerney, second.
I'll second it.
That's Tim McInerney. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, everybody have a good night and stay safe.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, guys.
Good night.